Hello there, and welcome to our second session of this Bible study based on our series Rebuilding, based on the book of Nehemiah that we're exploring through worship right now here at St. Andrews. If you missed the first session, you can find it earlier on this YouTube channel, and it's this particular session, this session 2, is based on the sermon preached on Sunday, February 20th, which again you can find here on this YouTube channel, or you can go to our website standrews.ws to find that there as well. We're looking this week at Nehemiah chapter 3, and as I mentioned in the message, this chapter can be a bit of a tough going with all the Hebrew names of people, places, communities. But ultimately, I believe it's important to sit down and really read this full chapter. If you're struggling with the pronunciation, particularly if you're reading it out loud, which is something like I do find helpful, you can find a number of audio Bible resources out there. One that you can use that's really accessible is BibleGateway.com. They have a number of different readers for the New International Version, the NIV of this chapter, and there's a link in the study notes to that. But there's also all kinds of other audio Bibles, and again, it might be even helpful just to listen, hear these names recited out. And when you have read or listened to this chapter, pause. Didn't take time to do this last week, but pause and consider your first impressions. What stands out to you? And as you're working through this, it may be helpful to have a notebook just to write down your impressions, particularly if you're working on this by yourself, or if you're using these resources with a group. You can take notes too, or just have your conversation. And we're going to go through this chapter in 4 parts, like we did last week. You can listen to this resource all at once, or you can press pause at various points and work through the questions one at a time. So the first item I'd like us to focus on is the significance of people being named in the Bible. In the message I talk about this, and it's always important when people's names are recorded, because many times in the Bible they aren't. There are a lot of stories are about anonymous people. But when they are named, this often has to do with people being remembered and their contribution to God's story being honored. We can think of the woman who anointed Jesus in John. She's named as Mary. She's actually an anonymous person in the other Gospels, but it's important that her contribution to God's work is remembered. It's an important thing in the Bible. In other cases, it's about connecting the people reading the story in the present with those who have gone before in the faith. And certainly when Nehemiah was written, a lot of people living in Judah would be the descendants of the people who rebuilt the wall. In fact, there's a whole bunch of lists in Ezra and Nehemiah helping the people in the present remember their connection to the people who rebuilt Jerusalem, the kingdom of Judah, and didn't give up on being part of God's people. And so there are some questions for you to reflect on as we think about the significance of names and the place that we and others have in God's story. All right, so this is item number 2 as we go through Nehemiah chapter 3. Take a closer look at the list of names that you see there. There are a lot of different groups of people. The obvious categories there are people like priests and governing officials, important people in the community, but there are an enormous, incredible variety of people mentioned. Merchants, goldsmiths, there's a perfume maker in there, but that's just a few of them. Take time, look at the diversity of people. Note maybe even that there are a few women who are named there, which again is significant in this ancient context. And if you've got time, try to count every name. If you don't have time, and it is quite a long list of names, consider that Nehemiah divided the wall into roughly 40 sections, and there are usually several individuals and families named for each. And then consider the significance of the diversity of people and the sheer number of people involved in this work and what it has to say. There's, again, some questions to help you think through and reflect on again, this diversity and variety and just sheer number of people who were all needed to be a part of this important work. All right, so this is item 3 in our study today. The main theme in the message that I developed from this is the importance of working together, how critical it is to work together. Yet the reality is there are a number of different ways for us to work together. You particularly take a closer look at verses 28 to 30, and you'll notice there that there are some people who work as groups of people, the merchants, goldsmiths, and again throughout the section there's a sense of integrated groups, and then there are a few individuals who are named as working specifically. They took the spot in front of their own house, which was near the wall, and they worked on that a little more independently. And so the questions here have to do with how do we work together? Do we work better as a group, together collectively, or are you someone who maybe finds it easier to work independently, take your work that you've done and then integrate it into the larger whole? There's no right answer. We're all a little different, and the questions invite you to explore again the best method for us working together in the church and just more broadly with others as we try and rebuild our lives right now. All right, this is the fourth and final theme that I want us to explore here in Nehemiah 3. The message that I preach ends with a look at the role that different groups and particularly communities, villages, towns, and regions outside of Jerusalem played in the rebuilding of the wall. It's not just individuals or families that contribute. It's a broader range of communities outside the discrete city of Jerusalem. And you can take a moment, again, read through those lists and see how many you can find. There's places like Mizpah, like Tekoa, communities within Judah who do their part to rebuild Jerusalem. And there's some questions there about, well, how easy do you find it for different groups to work together? Groups of people, different communities, and there's also some questions there about how different churches and organizations work together. Is this something that we find easy to do, or is it more challenging? Are there particularly ways to do that in a way that's helpful to both? One question I didn't put in there is how does it matter if it's a smaller group working with a bigger group, and how does it work for a bigger group to work with a number of smaller groups? There are lots of different ways that we can look at this, but I do want to again have this be applicable to you in your broader life, how you have found a group that you're part of works well with others, whether it's a neighborhood. But particularly as we were discerning our way forward here at St. Andrews, is how well do churches work together, and how might we find ways to do this as we try and rebuild our church, recognizing that, maybe it's not something we can do entirely on our own, and to do this in creative ways like we see here in Nehemiah. But take some time, look at those questions, and look at the other questions. And again, I hope that all this is useful. If you have some feedback for me, this is kind of a new format of Bible study that I'm exploring right now. But I do pray that these resources would be useful for you, either as an individual, within your family, or maybe if you want to get a small group of people together in a way that feels safe to you. I'd love if you could do that. And feel free to share these resources to people that you know who might appreciate a Bible study at this time. So that's all for this week's session. We'll have another one coming up next Sunday, and I think the plan at that point is to sort of catch up to the message series. We'll do probably chapters 4, 5, and 6 together. So if you want to get ahead on that reading, you can. All right, take care, everyone. We'll see you again for Bible study next week.